I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, 2 more Gazans breach Israeli territory ahead of tomorrow's protests. Thousands march in Paris to commemorate a murdered Holocaust survivor. And here in Tel Aviv, we suffer for fashion for a reason. And today, we're counting down the top reasons why. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Two more Palestinians have just been arrested breaching the Gaza fence and entering Israeli territory. This comes just ahead of tomorrow's massive protest along the Gaza border, and these suspects were reportedly carrying a knife and wire cutters, marking the 4th such infiltration of Palestinians from Gaza this week alone. The frequency of these breaches is even more alarming considering the IDF has only beefed up its security measures along the border. Clearly, tensions inside the Strip ahead of the massive 6-week protest set to begin tomorrow is only getting worse. The terror group is rallying citizens to various tent cities along the border to commemorate Land Day, the anniversary of Israel's 1976 appropriation of Galilee land, which happens to overlap with the eve of Passover.
هدفنا الأول والأخير هو إيصال رسالة بأنه لا يضيع حق وراءه مطالب وبأن أقصى أمنياتنا هو العودة إلى مدننا الفلسطينية وقرانا الفلسطينية التي هاجر منها أجدادنا قسرا.
The army is gearing up for what could possibly be the bloodiest clashes in quite some time. Neatly 100 snipers authorized to use live fire if they see breaches in progress have been stationed around the Strip. Additional troops have also been supplemented to the army's usual posts, which include special combat units. Hamas has called this demonstration a peaceful sit-in, despite their militia's largest ever live fire drill earlier this week. Given this breakout of infiltrations, it's clear neither Hamas nor Israel believe much of this will be peaceful at all. Joining us now in the studio with how Israel should prepare and respond to the upcoming Gaza protest is former Labor Knesset member and former head of the Mossad, Major General Dani Yatom, and Middle East expert and colonel in the reserves, Dr. Ruben Belko. All right, so let's begin. This peaceful sit-in, as Hamas puts it, is coming just days after the largest Hamas live drill that Israel has essentially ever seen. So what is going on right now in the minds of Israeli defense officials?
Well, I think that the Israeli defense officials should take the threats very seriously and should prepare themselves to a march of many people. I don't know how many. I know that Hamas tries to encourage the Gazans. They do not like the idea, the Gazans, the regular Gazian. He does not want to participate in such a march because he might get killed. But it is the Hamas which is behind it. And the big exercise that Hamas executed was, I think, in order to have a show of force.
What I'd like to say, I mean, there is said to be thousands of Gazans collecting for the protest, like you said, and what if they were all to simultaneously rush the fence? What would Israel or what could Israel do about that?
I believe that one should pay attention seriously to what the spokesman of Hamas has declared several minutes ago. He said, we are about to go back to our cities, homes, in occupied Palestine. They really mean it. Actually, they meant to do it several times. So in principle, we should take this declaration very, very seriously, as Brigadier General Yatom said. But in addition to this, we also have to understand and to take into account the fact that Hamas basically built on the citizens of Gaza, innocent sometimes, citizens of Gaza, to any military act. They have used them in the last battles as human shields, and now they put them on the front of what they mean to break.
So I'd like to also, mention the humanitarian aspect here, which you spoke about right now. How will Israel maintain its humanitarian edge, during these upcoming demonstrations that we're about to see? Because certainly the world is going to be watching how Israel reacts to these protests.
As far as I am concerned, I think that there are 3 main factors that the Israeli Defense Forces and the security apparatuses should behave accordingly. The first one is to reinforce the forces over there and to bring as many as possible soldiers to face the number of thousands or maybe more than a few thousands, maybe dozens of thousands Palestinians. Because for them it will be much more difficult for the Palestinians to infiltrate into Israel if they will face an armada of many, many Israeli soldiers. Secondly, not to allow even one of the Palestinians to cross the border into Israel, to avoid it. And the third one, which might be contradictory, is to make all the efforts so that the number of casualties, especially killed Palestinians, will be small. Now to your question, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is awful. Nobody helps today the Gazans, not the Egyptians, neither any other Arab country, even not Abu Mazen. On the contrary, Abu Mazen squeezes them. The only people that pay attention to the humanitarian situation in Gaza are us, the Israelis. So on one hand, we have to, as I said, to build a wall, so to speak, in order to avoid them, to infiltrate into Israel. On the other hand, to tell them that after this march of return will come to a cease, then we will speak with the Egyptians and with many others in order to see how do we rehabilitate the situation in Gaza.
I mean, I guess my final question here is how concerned is Israel truly? I mean, obviously there are all these apparatuses, these plans being set up to kind of deal with this issue. But on the ground within the military itself, is there a deep concern about what could take place here?
No.
Yeah.
From my own experience, I remember that Israel has developed several means of overcoming this mess, people coming into our side. But I believe that we should stop them in any means, of course, trying the most we can in order not to kill anybody, but to injure. On the other hand, I believe that this is an attack. This is, despite the fact that they're using people, this is a military, vulgar, cynical attack on Israel using people instead of missiles. So the response is, in a case that this increases, in a case that Israel find it hard to stop it, I believe that we should go back to square one and interpret this aggressive act of Hamas in a response deep in his backgrounds, deep is in his stands, holds, and etc., etc. I believe that the response should be on the back of Hamas headquarters.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Jordan has officially given the thumbs up to Israel's new ambassador to their country, the longtime diplomat Amir Weisbrod. This is especially good news because Weisbrod's approval to represent Israel means that the diplomatic standoff between the two countries is finally over. Tensions between Jordan and Israel suddenly took a dive last summer when an Israeli guard killed a Jordanian trying to stab him with a screwdriver outside the embassy in Amman. A Jordanian citizen was killed in the crossfire. Israel evacuated its diplomatic envoy from Amman, and relations remained frozen for nearly half a year. That all changed this past January when Israel agreed to pay the Jordanian government millions in compensation for the deaths and agreed to look into prosecuting the guard involved in the incident. A month later, Israel announced its new pick for the ambassador position, along with the news that the embassy in Amman was soon to reopen. Weisbrod is considered by most to be a solid pick for the job. He spent years in both Jordan and Morocco, speaks fluent Arabic, and is well regarded by both Israeli and Jordanian officials. Thousands of Parisians took to the streets yesterday to protest the growing anti-Semitism in France, as well as to mourn the loss of murdered Holocaust survivor Miriel Knoll. Knoll was stabbed dead and then burnt in her apartment when the attackers allegedly set fire to her home after the murder last Friday. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on the story. So Aaron, has this attack officially been termed anti-Semitism?
As of this point in the investigation, it has not been termed anti-Semitism, but it is largely thought to be anti-Semitism at this point in the investigation. That being said, I mean, they're still pulling out a lot of the details of the attack. It could be more personal. It could be less, religiously motivated. As we know, 2 suspects have already been detained in the attack, one of which was actually convicted prior for sexually molesting a 12-year-old girl who was staying with Noel previously in the past.
Right. Well, let's go back to the march now. Protesters are voicing increased concern over the rise of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks in France. What is being done about it?
Well, I mean, that depends on who you ask, of course. But that being said, the government has, since 2015, unveiled a €100 million deal initiative to try and combat anti-Semitism, discrimination, racism, etc. Part of that was deploying hundreds of police officers and soldiers across Jewish communities and in front of their schools and synagogues and things like that. And anti-Semitism actually in that time has been reduced by 58% nearly. And
hate crimes
in
overall,
general, have been reduced by 44%.
Yeah, well, obviously the people of France clearly don't feel like enough is being done. The case in point is that Muriel Knoll herself actually reported to the police that she had been threatened with arson, and then this happened.
And that is actually part of the problem, is that a lot of the people have lost faith in the police to enforce protections against anti-Semitism and things like that, which actually may even account for why the number of anti-Semitism reports have been reduced, because maybe those reports just aren't being made, even though they might still be happening. And then on the other hand, that might also explain why you had such antagonism at the march against certain politicians.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Aaron, with the update. The probes into the alleged corruption committed by Prime Minister Netanyahu has intensified. Earlier this week, Netanyahu's wife Sarah and son Yair were questioned by police as official suspects in Case 4000. That case alleges that the Prime Minister gave benefits to the Israeli telecom giant Bezek, all in exchange for favorable news coverage. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with the latest updates. And Brett, how exactly are Netanyahu's wife and son involved here?
Well, to be questioned as suspects in the case means they could potentially be very involved here. Apparently, the police have evidence suggesting that both Sarah and Yair Netanyahu facilitated these deals between the PM's office and Bezek personnel through the Prime Minister's former media advisor, and that would be Neil Hefetz, who was arrested last month and recently turned state's witness. And that's a huge development in here because,
I understand that. Hefetz has apparently presented police with all kinds of recordings and text messages, some possibly even from Sarah and Yair Netanyahu personally. Now, what does Netanyahu, or I guess what do the Netanyahus as a family say about this?
Right. Well, the Prime Minister has stuck to that mantra that, there's nothing here, there's nothing going to be here. But this is where things get tricky for Yair and Sarah, because they're both also suspected of deleting these texts from their phones to potentially cover up evidence, which would obviously be quite serious.
Yeah, that would be obstructing an investigation.
Correct. Now, as part of that interrogation that happened this week on Monday, they were presented with those texts from the state's witness. Both wife and son said something along the lines of, well, what's wrong with wanting the coverage of my family to be positive? That's not a crime. But it is a crime if they arranged deals and then knowingly deleted evidence of it. Yair Netanyahu claims he didn't delete any evidence. Sarah Netanyahu has told police that she didn't delete any single one message, merely large chunks of data in order to clear space on her phone.
Now, I want to point something out here, something the Netanyahu family has decried again and again here, which is that their family is being unfairly persecuted in the media. I mean, we've had not one, but 2 very incriminating recordings of both Sarah and Yair Netanyahu leaked to the press recently. And the details that we're talking about here, these are from inside an ongoing police investigation. Has this all become a witch hunt, like Netanyahu says, in your opinion?
Look, on one hand, you're talking about the freedom of the press, and that freedom exists, in some part anyway, to keep our systems honest. And ironically, that's exactly the institution Netanyahu himself is accused of compromising in his favor now. Now, on the other hand, some of the things that do seem to leak out to the media do feel kind of personal, like this tape you're saying, the tape of Sarah Netanyahu screaming at her aide that leaked in January. I mean, think of that what you will, but it doesn't really have any impact on these police investigations. The recording of Yair, on the other hand, that mentioned a gas deal, and that could be a different story, but obviously this is in itself a larger discussion.
Yeah, a lawyer representing Sarah and Yair Netanyahu has filed a complaint against the police demanding an investigation into those alleged leaks. But with these corruption probes still a very pressing issue,
Right, we're just
I have a feeling more
more
developments are still on the way. All right, thanks for the update, Brett.
Sure.
For years now, religious leaders in Israel have been demanding the government to forbid soccer matches on the Shabbat weekend. Typically, games are held on Fridays and Saturdays and broadcast live to TV audiences. But it looks like Israeli soccer fans can breathe easy now. Knesset ministers have officially decided that it's game on. Soccer will now continue on Shabbat unchanged. While this particular issue is not nearly as contentious as the debate surrounding the recent ultra-Orthodox draft bill from Army service, it does represent the overall clash between religion and state. For soccer matches to happen, it requires not only the participation of the players, but also sports crews, TV crews, and security to make sure they go off as scheduled. And lately, the government has been clamping down on laws to uphold the Jewish observance of the day of rest. Recently, the Knesset voted in favor of a law shuttering the vast majority of businesses from staying open on Shabbat altogether, though the city of Tel Aviv was exempted. The national sport of soccer, however, has long been absolved from Shabbat laws as well. Some say this is why the sport has been allowed to flourish into both a significant cultural pastime as well as a lucrative one here in the Holy Land. Religious leaders, however, say soccer should fall under Jewish law just like everything else. All right, sometimes it feels like our technology just isn't fast enough, but now Israeli researchers say they may have the tech breakthrough of the decade. They've created a completely new microchip that's capable of making everything from our smartphones to our computers 100 times faster. Next stop, light speed. This incredible tech is known as a terahertz chip, something scientists for decades have only theorized about until now. Terahertz technology has been out of reach due to the fact that the systems tend to overheat when performing at such high speeds. Well, one Israeli team at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem has been studying this exact problem for 3 years now. And they say their newest proof of concept solves the dilemma using flash memory and a metal oxide nitride oxide silicon system. Whatever that means. Data is transferred through light, just like fiber optic cables, which could not only boost speeds, but keep the technology affordable for consumers. In a world that's becoming more and more digital every day, a 100 times speed boost would truly be a game changer. Autism spectrum disorders are among the fastest growing developmental disorders worldwide, with at least 1 in every 110 American children being diagnosed as being on the spectrum. The biggest problem, though, is how society sees people on the autism spectrum. And my next guest has come up with an incredibly unique way to relate her experiences with autism to the world. Joining me now in the studio is the founder of OT, Ola Gal.
Hi.
All right, thanks for joining us. I already see you have a couple of very interesting shirts in front of you, and you're wearing one. Tell us first, what is OT?
OT is a fashion brand, first of all, that need to explain and bring knowledge about autism to people that not relative to this exactly. I'm relative to this because my nephew is a autistic child, but another people like you or maybe other people don't know what is autism.
Right,
Yeah.
of course. So this is something that you were exposed to your entire life. So tell us kind of about why you decided to put this into fashion, because that doesn't seem like the most typical direction that people would take on this issue.
Yeah, because I want it to be like something that everyone can be wear and like it, because I don't want to force to know autism. I want people to know it through them own experience.
Right.
Yes.
Well, what do some of these shirts say here? We have, okay, yours obviously, when I grow up, I want to be a dreamer.
Every print on every shirt, it's have a story about me and Ronel. It's a personal story that brings some kind of things about autism in kind of ways.
What about this one right here? This is...
It's the back of the shirt.
Okay.
It's actually very cool because this is his voice.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
We took some piece from his shout and print the letters on it, because he's very loud sometimes when he don't know how to express himself
or control his voice. Yeah.
Frustrated, so express himself through shouts. So sometimes people don't understand this and don't know this. So I want to.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm for sure. I mean, people can get a much different view of this. Now, tell us, where can we get these awesome T-shirts?
They have an online. You can purchase online on the brand site. It's OT. collection.com.
ot-collection.com, my
yeah.
friends. All right, well, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. A beautiful initiative, and I hope it goes well for you. All right. Like any holiday, Passover is a time to reflect not just on the past, but also on our future. And to that end, humanitarian groups have come together to deliver literally tons of Passover matzah, wine, and food to needy families all across the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. Donations will also reach the smaller Jewish communities in India and even Egypt. Over 100,000 boxes of everyone's favorite unleavened cracker thing are being delivered all over areas of the former Soviet Union. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 20 tons of matzah. Many of the recipients are elderly Jews in Belarus, Moldova, Russia, and Ukraine. The American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee has worked tirelessly with several top Jewish and Christian organizations to make this all possible. But there's more to it than just matzah. The JDC plans to organize cultural activities, workshops, and Seder meals throughout the former USSR to keep the tradition alive. Boxes of wine and matzah are even on their way to India. And India is the most populated country on the planet, but its Jewish community only numbers a few thousand. Same goes in Egypt, where there are less than 50 Jews currently living. Well, the agency hasn't forgotten them either. Some matzah is already on the way, and that's probably very good news because I doubt it's easy to find kosher Passover grub in Cairo. All right, now it is time for Emmanuel Kadosh's Top 5.
Fashion Week in Tel Aviv is behind us, and with that comes all different types of innovations presented at the shows. Well, I'm here to give you guys the top 5 innovations found at the Tel Aviv Fashion Week. Number 1 on our list, 3D pattern making. Made in Israel, Optitex software allows designers to perfect their garments before sewing or cutting by combining 2D designs with 3D pattern making. Through this partnership with Optitex and one of Israel's best design schools, Shankar, students are able to update their skills as often as the software updates. 3D printing is the new thing, people. Second on our list is brought to us by Israeli textile designer Moriel Dezaldeti. Moriel developed a textile technique that blurs the lines between 3D art objects and clothing by combining knitting and weaving with modern techniques such as laser cuts and digital embroidery. Using this technique ultimately creates unique, timeless designs. Third up is the twine solution. The textile industry is responsible for 20% of the world's water pollution, which is where the Petah Tikva-based startup comes in. Twine Solution enables on-demand textile thread dyeing in an eco-friendly process that requires no water. The technology behind this is unbelievable and helps eliminate dead stock and other waste costs. Doesn't get much better than that. Fourth on our list comes from the Israeli designer Stav Ofman. This young designer is taking embroidery to the next level. Instead of sticking with the traditional embroidery method, Stav used synthetic hair to create intricate floral patterns and braiding. Ofman even won first prize in the London's hand and lock embroidery competition just last year for her unique designs and technique. Last but not least is brought to us by another young Israeli designer, Dana Cohen. Cohen focuses on sustainability as well as giving new life to old textiles by collecting used fabrics, shreds them to make soft felt-like materials for her collections. Fun fact about this young designer, she even used 5 NASA photographs to guide the patterns of the green, red, and pink felts. Now that's just thinking outside the box. That's all for today's Top 5. Back to you.
All right, here comes our Hebrew word of the day. With just a day until Passover, today's word is for the bitter herb you'll be forced to eat if you're doing a Seder this year, marol. As it says in the book of Exodus, with bitter herbs they shall eat it. And what bitter herb is that? Well, marol, of course. Yes, there are 6 symbolic items spread out on a Seder plate. But everyone always cringes when it comes time to swallow the marol. Traditionally, you dip the marol in some salt water, symbolizing the bitter tears of the ancient Jews who slaved away in Egypt under Pharaoh's rule. Some families substitute horseradish for marol because, let's be honest, marol may not be the tastiest. Don't worry though, a little matzo ball soup afterwards will help the medicine go down. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be partly cloudy with a light haze and a chance of rain. The low will be about 57 or 14 degrees Celsius. Then this Passover weekend should be a bit colder as temperatures are expected to drop, with more rain across the country tomorrow as well. The high will be about 71 or 22 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.5 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for watching.